All right, we have number 108. This is Liberty Leaving the People by Eugene Delacroix, a very, very famous painting that I'm sure you're all pretty familiar with. This is considered, well, first of all, Delacroix was considered one of the most important French Romantic painters, particularly after the early death of Géricault, who painted the Raft of Medusa. He depicted contemporary heroes and victims engaged in the violent struggles of the times. And this piece is definitely inspired by the Raft of Medusa, which was really Géricault's only large scale painting. This was made in 1830. It is 8 by 11 feet, and this painting is meant to encapsulate the history of France after the fall of Napoleon and the Revolution of 1830, which led to what is known in history as the July Monarchy. After the defeat of Napoleon in 1815, the victorious neighboring nations reimposed the French monarchy under Louis XVIII, who was the brother of the decapitated Louis XVI. The king's power was limited by a constitution and parliament, but the government over time became more and more conservative, and as the years passed, it would undo many revolutionary reforms, including freedom of the press. Louis's younger brother, Charles X, reinstated press censorship, returned education to the control of the Catholic Church, and would limit voting rights. These actions trigger a large-scale uprisings in the streets of Paris, and over the course of 3 days in July of 1830, the Bourbon monarchical line was overthrown, and Louis-Philippe d'Orléans replaced his cousin Charles X and promised to abide by a new constitution, which would lead to the Third Republic, and that doubled the number of elected legislatures, among other things. Louis Philippe was known as a citizen king, and even though only 2% of the population could vote in France at that time, he was definitely more popular than his predecessor. So this period in French history is known as the July Monarchy, and it goes from 1830 and it ends in 1848 with another French Revolution. But 1848 wasn't just a revolutionary year for France. There were revolutions throughout Europe in the year of 1848. In this large modern history painting, Delacroix memorialized the July 1830 revolution that just took a few months, so he painted it just a few months after it took place. Though it records some aspects of actual events, it also departs from the facts in ways that further are supposed to further an intended message. What is accurate is that Delacroix's revolutionaries were considered a motley crew. It included students, artisans, laborers, children, and even top-hatted intellectuals. The top-hatted man represents the middle class, whereas the white shirt man next to him represents a laborer. They stumble through the smoke, crossing the barricades of trash, refuse, and dead bodies. The barricade was a common tool to stop royal troops. Prior to the modernization of Paris, the streets of Paris were very, very narrow, and they would use furniture and like break up cobblestones, do whatever they could to block streets so that the army couldn't get to the people who were rioting. Now, in the foreground, we have two murdered men that were suspected revolutionaries and in their beds, and that's why they had dragged their bodies into the streets as a warning. The other man is a royalist soldier, which shows the enemy is vulnerable. In the background on the right, there is the towers of the Notre Dame are visible through the smoke in the background, and the Notre Dame was supposed to be considered a symbol of the king's power. Now, the imagined things, or what he uses imagination on, is that their leader is a classical allegorical figure of liberty, meaning freedom. And she is personified by a gigantic, muscular, half-naked woman charging across the barricade with the tricolore, or the revolutionary flag, in one hand and the bayoneted rifle in the other. She has exposed breasts precisely because she is an imagined figure, or an embodiment of the ideal form of the human figure, and that may be a reference to the idea that democracy was born in ancient Greece. However, she is wearing a Phrygian cap. That's spelled Phrygian, and that was supposed to be an ancient symbol for a freed slave that was worn by the insurgents in the July of 1830 protest. She presents the event, I'm sorry, Delacroix presents the event as an emotionally charged moment just before the ultimate sacrifice as the revolutionaries charged the barricades to face near certain death. Like Jericho's composition of the Raft of Medusa, this is a pyramidal composition. It's definitely a reactionary to the sharp edges of neoclassicism. There's blurred edges, loose brushstrokes, and subdued colors. Delacroix didn't painstakingly blend colors, but instead he uses pure pigment, and that creates the bright colors. It emphasizes the blue and the red and as symbols of the French flag.